Hello, everybody. It's me, Fee, or Fiona Timms, otherwise known as White Zulu, author of my autobiography of the same name. And I welcome you all to another chapter of my book. I do hope you're all enjoying my life story, and I must thank all of you for being such dedicated subscribers, especially those who have written such complimentary comments below my videos. They are much appreciated. I would like to point out that the previous South African flag hanging on the wall behind me is not a political statement. It is simply a piece of history in the background of my first 50 years of my life, being born and growing up in my beloved mother country, South Africa. My autobiography, White Zulu, is not a political commentary, and frankly describes my experiences of growing up with the Zulu tribe as my family. That flag is simply a piece of cloth signifying the history of South Africa. It was originally used by the Union of South Africa from 1928 to 1961, and later the Republic of South Africa until 1994. Hello, everybody. Svee Timms here, Fiki. You know who I am. I just have to do something quickly here. That's better. And welcome to another part of my life story, growing up as a young girl in Durban, the good old days. And I'd met this gorgeous young man. Oh, he was absolute heaven. And I'd had a date or two off with him, but he hadn't even tried to kiss me. And I was desperate for him to feel the way I felt about him. So I left you with, he just dropped me off again and given me a peck on the cheek. And I was beside myself with horror. So I carry on, I just repeat, my goodness, I didn't want to scare him off. He seemed so skittish. It was just as well I'd only had 2 castle lagers with my lunch. That was up at Salt Rock when we had that crayfish dinner. Lunch was gorgeous. Or who knew what I might have done? My inhibitions were precarious enough right now. With some effort and a fortunately inaudible sigh, I put my hand on the door handle, at which signal Fred jumped out and hurried to open my door for me. I had to get out, however reluctantly, and I waved to him before I walked into the building. At 7 the following evening, my name came over the PA system saying I had a visitor, and I felt another jolt like a bolt of electricity surge through me as I saw Fred standing in the foyer. It almost took my breath away to find him there, so tall, so incredibly handsome. I'd forgotten in the space of 24 hours just how deeply the sight of him affected me. My pulse raced and I felt my knees go a little wobbly as I walked over to him as casually as I possibly could. Hi, I was hoping for a kiss. Hello, he said, and offered me his arm to walk me out to his car. I examined him closely as he opened my door for me. What are you wearing under your shirt? I asked curiously, before I could stop myself. I could see what looked like some sort of lattice work material under the finely checked cotton shirt he wore. I ran my hand over his shoulder, feeling a soft, waffle-like texture. "That's my string vest," he said guardedly. "Your what?" I hoped my disbelief didn't make me sound rude. Well, it probably did, but I hoped he might take it in the right spirit. "My string vest," he repeated, a little defensively, because my face revealed distinct amusement. "Nanny always said to wear a string vest. Keeps you warm in the winter and cool in summer." That did it. I burst out laughing, my caution thrown to the winds as I bent over and reeled around, holding my sides, as I cackled inelegantly, gasping and snorting. Eventually, I straightened myself, tried to regain my composure, and dabbed tears from my eyes with the back of my hand. With almost majestic dignity, he stood there on the pavement, only a slight twitching at the corners of his expressive mouth betraying him. "Even in South Africa?" I asked, and he started to chuckle as well. "Yes, it does seem a bit crazy when I think about it." I was about to pursue his "nanny said" comment when I remembered that I'd also been brought up by a nanny. She'd given me advice too, dire warnings more like, of consequences far more bizarre than those of not wearing your vest. Fire-breathing dragons snatching disobedient children was more Evelina's mark, so I left it. We went to the Four Seasons, a restaurant on the beachfront, and ate medium rare grilled steak and sautéed potatoes with crisp golden onion rings. Our table at the big picture window had a good view of the sea, and Fred was fascinated by the phosphorescence that glowed in the surf and shone in white tumbles as each wave broke onto the sand. We had a romantically dark candlelit corner in the restaurant, and I was hoping that he'd take my hand or kiss me. But he didn't. Was he just too shy? Did he look on me simply as a friend? Wasn't he attracted to me? I racked my brains searching for the answers as we talked and laughed. But when he took me back to my residence at the end of the evening, all I got was another peck on the cheek. It was with extreme frustration that I trudged upstairs to meet with the gang who were gathering outside around the kettle as usual. As we sat on my bed and drank coffee, I asked Angie and the other girls the same questions I'd been asking myself. "Maybe I'm just not his type," I said sorrowfully. "Perhaps he likes upper-class gals, you know, the debutante kind who likes to hunt for foxes and shoot pheasants. But he doesn't strike me as being particularly socially inclined. He didn't mention parties or hunt balls to me. I don't know." And I drooped forlornly on my bed, kicking off my slippers dejectedly. "I teased him about his string vest," I said after a pause. "I wonder whether I insulted him." "What string vest?" asked someone. "I don't want to go into it," I groaned. "It's too humiliating." "He's taking you out again, isn't he?" reassured Angie. "That must mean something." "Yes," I wailed, "but we've had 2 dates now and he hasn't even kissed me yet." I dropped my head into my hands, ran my fingers through my hair, tugging at it with frustration. "I don't want to be friends with him. I want him to love me. I'm crazy about him. Fred took me out every night that week. We went to the drive-in movies, a novel experience for him. Gosh, can you imagine watching a film from your car in the UK? He laughed. With our climate, you'd never have the windscreen wipers off. Another new experience for him was the Mexican hat. I don't know if any of you who've been to Durban beachfront remember the Mexican hat. The drive-in fast food place on the beachfront, where an Indian waiter ran up to our car as soon as we'd come to a halt in their car park facing the sea. He took our orders, asking us to wind our windows down halfway. He returned carrying a tray with a little frame that hooked over the window glass so that we could eat our burgers in the car. Fred found it great fun, and afterwards we strolled along the floodlit beachfront with its strings of fairy-coloured lights reflecting off the sea. I was expecting him to take my hand at least, but he didn't, and I resigned myself sadly to the fact that this was going to be a platonic friendship, if it continued at all. The realization did nothing to silence the ache of longing I carried about with me all the time now. I'd turned down all the invitations from the other crowd I'd regularly been spending my evenings with, like the surfers and the university guys. Going out with the guys suddenly had no appeal. I'd lost interest in them completely and spent my days marking time until Fred picked me up in the evenings. On Friday night, he took me to the ice rink. I'd done a bit of skating in Switzerland on the tennis courts. I think I showed you a photo of that. And Fred said he'd learned to skate on the loch at Glencruiton Castle, their family home in the Scottish Highlands. When we fell over, we had to hold our sides from laughing as we skittered and scrabbled on the ice, trying to get up again. At the end of the evening, Fred asked me if I'd like to see his flat. It's got a lovely view over the harbour. Perhaps you'd like a cup of coffee to warm you up. I accepted this invitation with alacrity, trying not to sound as if I'd been dying to see his flat. It was on the top floor of Kingsford, a 12-storey building that had only recently been completed. It's nothing much, he said modestly as he showed me around. It was simple bachelor accommodation with a sitting room, a separate bedroom, a bathroom and a kitchen. But best of all was the glassed-in balcony overlooking the yacht basin. I rented it for the view, he explained, and we stood and gazed at the water that glittered with the reflected lights of the yacht clubhouse. I could just make out masts and outlines of boats moored there, swaying slightly in the gentle swell. Sit down and I'll get you a cup of coffee. Fred returned from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs. A drop of Cointreau, he asked, and poured a generous tot into my mug. He put both mugs down on the low table in front of us and sat down next to me on the sofa in his sitting room. I was wearing what I considered to be an appropriate outfit for skating, a tiny mini red tartan kilt, sheer nylon tights, and a white sleeveless polo neck top. It was the fashion to wear lots of fine gilt chains around our necks, and I had on several loops and strands that dangled from under my polo neck collar. As I was happily chatting about the skating, Fred reached out and took a handful of the chains, my chains. These are lovely, he said, and carefully and deliberately he twisted his fingers around them and pulled on them very gently, drawing me towards him. He leant down and kissed me softly on the mouth. I melted. I arched towards him, moulding my body to his, and felt his tongue gently probing between my lips. My heart was beating rapidly, and I felt a warm glow growing inside me as he continued to kiss me more and more passionately. Eventually, he just held me in his arms, his face against my cheek. I must take you home. It's getting late, he whispered. I'll fetch you tomorrow morning, though. I remember nothing about the drive back to Nora House. After kissing me again, Fred drove off and left me to float upstairs to my room. My feet weren't touching the ground, and I could feel myself still glowing. The girls looked up from their coffee as I burst into Angie's room. He's kissed me, I explained. He's finally kissed me. And I threw myself onto her bed and hugged myself with joy. We knew he fancied you, said Angie, and the others nodded sagely in agreement. I was too excited to sleep, and I turned our evening over and over again in my mind, relishing the feeling of his warm lips on mine, the faintest roughness of stubble, the delicious scent of him, of his aftershave. Eventually, I told myself sternly that I had to get some sleep, as I didn't want to look like a haggard wreck in the morning when he picked me up. Fred had told me the night before that we were going to the beach again, so I got my swimming gear together and ran down to meet him. He drove us up the coast, but not as far as Salt Rock this time. Under my direction, he parked the car in some shade under a clump of trees overhanging an old, spooky Victorian beach house belonging to friends of ours, and we walked down a small path and onto a deserted beach. After we'd had a swim and lain on our towels to dry off, he said, "Wait right here, I'm going to get our lunch." He ran back to the car and came down again with a big blanket, a cool box, and a picnic basket. He'd bought French pâté and spread it onto fresh whole wheat bread, adding thinly sliced tomato. And we ate them between sips of ice-cold lager, finishing off our meal with fresh, juicy pineapple chunks he'd cut that morning. I was quite amazed and impressed, as in the 1960s no South African man would ever have dreamt of going anywhere near the kitchen, let alone preparing any food, be it a picnic or even a simple meal. Up until now, I'd only ever known a man to light a braai, toss some meat onto the rack once the fire was ready, turning the pieces over now and again, and pouring lager over them to douse the resulting flames before the meat became too badly charred. Then he'd call for a plate and hand it over to the women folk to add all the trimmings like salad and bread rolls. This is heaven, I said, and I meant it. Several silvery dolphins appeared while we were eating, slicing through the green breakers like glittering torpedoes. They surfed the waves for a few minutes before racing off out to sea with a flick of their tails that sent up a shower of droplets. After lunch, we lay on the blanket in the warm afternoon sunshine and we kissed. He sat up and put his hands on the rug on either side of my face as I lay back with eyes half closed. He leant forward to kiss me again, gazed into my eyes and sighed with pleasure. I fell in love with you the day I met you, he said softly. That is all for the time being, and there's more to come next week. I would like to thank John Moslane for putting aside his Friday afternoons to help me produce these videos. Without him, I could not do this. I would also like to thank Sean van Vuren for his sterling work in uploading my videos to my YouTube channel, adding the photos, as well as managing my channel so professionally. If you would like to know more about my other works, I have written 5 books in all, and each one is autobiographical. Please visit my website at www.whitezulubook.com, where you will find a lot more information as well as plenty of photographs. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my life story, and there is plenty more to come. A thumbnail photo will be attached each week, and thank you so much for all your support and all the very kind remarks you make in complimenting me on my work. I really appreciate it. Goodbye.